Grace didn't raise her voice. She never had to. But that morning, with the espresso machine hissing faintly and a service dog lying still beneath a corner table, something in her chest began to bend. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. It started with a clipboard. Logan Prescott walked like someone who measured respect in straight lines and stainless steel. His blazer was crisp, his shoes silent, and his tie, navy with a single silver line, was adjusted every time something human disrupted his routine. Now he adjusted it again. Shadow, the black lab curled under Ray's feet, had caught his eye. "That animal is in violation of state health code," he announced, loud enough to slice the café in half. A spoon froze mid-stir. Someone near the window instinctively lowered their phone. Lena, at the bar, stopped steaming milk, hands suspended mid-air. "He's a service dog," Grace replied calmly, stepping out from behind the counter. "He's federally protected." Prescott didn't budge. "I don't care what the vest says. Dander, hair, saliva, you want a citation or a shutdown." Grace glanced at Ray. The retired Marine stared straight ahead, jaw locked, hands tight around his mug. Shadow didn't flinch, then Prescott stepped forward. "If the animal stays, I call the health board or the police, your choice." A hum began rising in Grace's chest, the same one that always came when someone tried to measure human worth with policy. She looked down at her left hand. Her thumb brushed against the inside of her wedding ring, a habit she never noticed. Michael had died 6 years ago in Helmand Province, but the ring never left her finger. It wasn't a symbol of grief. It was a compass. "If serving someone who served this country means losing my job," she said, her voice firm but low, "then so be it." Prescott blinked. He adjusted his tie again, like he was more disturbed by disorder than by disrespect. From a back booth, a man coughed, loud but wordless. Then, without a word of warning, the café's side door opened, and Deborah Lyall entered, regional manager, trench coat buttoned to her chin, tablet in hand. She didn't need to ask. She'd seen enough. "Grace Donnelly," she said, tone clinical, "you've violated a direct compliance mandate in front of a state inspector. Pack your things, you're terminated." Lena gasped. Ray stood halfway. Someone at the front dropped a knife. But Grace didn't move, not at first. She looked around, at the chalkboard reading Heroes Hour, 9 am, at the folded flag above the register, at Lena, now visibly shaking behind the espresso machine, and at Ray, eyes still on her, like something fragile was being held together by her presence alone. Grace's breath caught. She thought of the utility bill sitting unpaid on the kitchen counter at home, of the discount card she used for groceries last week, of Michael, of the last photo they ever took together, him in jeans, not uniform, holding a mug of coffee outside this very door. Then she looked down, untied her apron, folded it neatly, no rush, and placed it on the counter as if returning something sacred. To Lena, she whispered, "Don't forget Ray's refill. He always stays for 2. Then Grace walked out, not in anger, not in shame, but in dignity. Outside, morning light crawled across the pavement like a slow confession. Grace got into her truck, shut the door, and didn't start the engine. Her apron lay beside her. Her hands rested in her lap, one still absently brushing the edge of the wedding band, a quiet, involuntary echo. Back inside, no one moved. Prescott was adjusting his clipboard. Deborah tapped on her tablet like it was a verdict. And Ray still hadn't touched his coffee. Lena poured it anyway. Steam curled upward and disappeared into the morning air. At the window, the man who had coughed earlier now slowly lowered his phone. The veteran pin on his jacket caught a glint of light. He didn't post the video yet. He just saved it. That night, Grace didn't sleep. She lay awake listening to the hum of the old fridge in the kitchen and the occasional creak of a settling wall. At 3:08 a.m. her phone buzzed. No caller ID, just a message. "You once made space for someone I couldn't reach. I haven't forgotten. I'll be in Mason tomorrow." She read it twice, then once more. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Some messages aren't questions. They're beginnings. The second morning came quieter than the first. Lena opened the café just after 6. The lights flickered on like someone whispering awake. She turned the sign to open, but didn't unlock the front door for another minute. Inside, the space looked unchanged. The same bar stools, the same bulletin board, the same faint hum from the old refrigerator, and yet something had shifted. On the hook beside the chalkboard, Grace's apron still hung, its strap curled like a tired hand. Below it, someone had placed a single white rose in a chipped water glass. No note, no signature, just grief arranged gently. The chalkboard still read, Hero's Hour, 9 a.m., free coffee, no questions. Lena hadn't erased it. At 6:43 sharp, Ray entered, no words, no nod, just a slow walk to the far table, Shadow trailing behind. They sat. Shadow curled, and Ray waited. Lena poured his usual cup without asking. Steam rose. Ray didn't reach for it. By 7:20, 3 veterans arrived. By 7:48, there were 7. None wore uniforms, but you could tell. In the way they stood, the way they looked at the empty space behind the counter. By 8:00, someone had left a laminated copy of Grace's termination notice, torn in half, and tucked it behind the napkin holder. By 8:06, a man in a grey windbreaker stood by the community board. He held a small white card between his fingers, paused for a breath, then pinned it carefully. Before turning to leave, he placed 2 fingers against it, brief, but unmistakably like a salute. The card read, "This house serves something stronger than coffee." No one asked who he was, but the veteran pin on his collar caught the morning light as he walked out. Far from Mason, in a quiet office, a man reviewed a file labeled, "Mason Quiet Watch." Inside were 2 photographs. One, from 2015, a woman wiping a plaque at a war memorial with her own handkerchief. She didn't know anyone had noticed, but someone had. The second was a postcard. Simple handwriting, postmarked 3 years ago. The program helped, but it didn't reach me, not really. Then I walked into a cafe, and she didn't ask questions. Ray M. Arnold folded the folder shut, then picked up the phone. "No escort," he said, "just the car, noon." At 9:01, the cafe was still. Steam lifted from untouched mugs. Chairs creaked softly. No one said Grace's name out loud. But it hung in the air like the flag on the wall, silent but recognized. At 9:17, the sound of tires brushing gravel turned heads. A black SUV rolled slowly into the lot. It didn't park center stage. Didn't even block the entrance. It just stopped beside the curb. The engine clicked. The driver's door opened. Arnold Schwarzenegger stepped out, no suit, no press. Just an old olive-green field jacket, dark jeans, and boots that looked like they'd known rain. He walked to the door, pushed it open. The bell gave a single soft chime. Nobody moved. Lena's hand froze halfway to a coffee pot. Ray looked up, eyes alert, unreadable. Shadow shifted, ears forward but body still. Arnold scanned the room once, not for drama, just for understanding. Then he spoke. "I'm not here for a speech," he said, "and I'm not here as a former anything." He stepped forward, voice low but solid. "I came because this place held the line when others wouldn't, because Grace Donnelly made it safe to be seen, and because silence should never cost someone their job." From the far corner, a clipboard clicked shut. Prescott, who had returned to finalize his report, didn't say a word. But for the first time in 2 decades of inspections, he quietly slid the citation form back into his briefcase and closed it. Arnold turned toward Lena. "Is she here?" Lena shook her head, voice catching. "No, sir, she hasn't come back." He nodded, slowly, as if he expected that. Then he walked to the bulletin board, reached up, and peeled off the Mason mug corporate logo. Folded it once cleanly, and placed it beside the espresso machine. In its place, he pinned the white card the old veteran had left earlier. "This house serves something stronger than coffee." He stood for a moment, then turned to Lena again. "When she's ready," he said, "tell her I don't build things to watch them get erased." And with that, he stepped back through the door. The bell chimed once more. The SUV didn't roar off. It pulled away slowly, like a man leaving something sacred behind, not finished, but entrusted. Inside, Ray lifted his cup. Shadow sighed deeply, and Lena finally exhaled. Grace hadn't meant to respond. She'd read the message. Twice, then again, hours later, with the kitchen dark and her coffee gone cold. "You once made space for someone I couldn't reach. I haven't forgotten. I'll be in Mason tomorrow. She didn't text back, but she didn't leave either. At 11:32 the knock came, not urgent, not soft, just certain, like someone remembering where to find a door they once needed. Grace opened it. Arnold stood on the porch. No entourage, no badge. Just wind-worn boots and a field jacket with the collar turned up. "Grace," he said, like someone greeting a peer. She stepped aside. He walked in. The kitchen was quiet, too quiet. Not like the cafe's gentle hum, but the kind of stillness that follows something ending. Arnold didn't sit. He looked around, then rested one hand lightly on the edge of the table, like testing if the structure still held. "I should have come sooner," he said. "After Ray sent me that postcard, but I didn't want to interrupt something sacred." Grace didn't speak. Her arms were crossed lightly, but her thumb moved unconsciously, brushing the inside of her wedding ring. That same old habit. He placed a folded envelope on the table. "It's not a job," he said. "It's a handoff." She didn't reach for it, just kept her eyes on him. "I'm not licensed," she said softly. "I don't have degrees. I'm not qualified." Arnold's eyes didn't leave hers. "You built something that held, with silence and burnt coffee and memory. That's rarer than any program I've ever funded." He gestured gently. "There's a space at Fort Granger, empty. Meant to be transitional, but no one's ever truly arrived there. I think you already have." Before Grace could answer, a voice interrupted from the hallway. "Is that her?" A young woman stepped into view, slender. Burn scars along her jawline and arms, softened by the sleeves of a long sweater. Her name tag said Tiffany Rios. In one hand, she held the leash of a golden retriever pup, the vest marked in training. In the other, a square piece of faded cloth, frayed edges, the remains of a military unit patch. She fidgeted with it as she spoke. "I saw the video. You, the dog, that man. I haven't sat inside anywhere since I got home." Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. "I didn't think I could, but then I saw how you stood, how you didn't flinch, and I thought, maybe I could sit if someone like you was standing." She knelt to adjust the pup's vest. Her fingers trembled slightly, still gripping the cloth. "This was my father's," she said, not looking up. "He never made it back, but he always said you can feel safe if someone makes the room safe first." Grace's hand froze midair. For a moment, she wasn't in her kitchen anymore. She saw Michael, not in uniform, but in the space between Tiffany's silences, in the way her hand trembled, in the way she waited, hoping someone else would speak first. It broke something. Not loudly, but completely. She reached for the envelope, opened it slowly. Inside, a sketch of the Granger space, notes scribbled in pen, a simple line at the bottom, "Build it like you've already been building it." She looked back at Arnold. "You're serious?" He nodded, as a heart attack. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a key. As he handed it to her, he didn't say a word, just met her eyes like someone passing a torch, not a task. Grace turned the key in her palm once, then once more, then looked to Tiffany. "I don't have a sign," she said softly. Tiffany looked up. "You don't need one," she whispered. That evening, Grace drove to Fort Granger alone. No GPS. No directions. She'd made this drive before, back when she was just dropping off muffins and holding her breath. The road hadn't changed, but she had. The building stood low, brick and unpainted. The air smelled like dust and pine. A few soldiers passed her on the way in. No one stopped her. Inside, blank walls, folded chairs, a broken clock. She didn't unpack, didn't sweep. She just walked to the far wall, pulled out a photo from her coat, Michael in jeans and a flannel, standing in front of the cafe, mug in hand. She pinned it to the wall, then reached into her bag, pulled out an old object she hadn't touched since yesterday, her name tag from the Mason mug. Faded, coffee-stained, no longer needed. She pinned it underneath the photo. Not as an introduction, as a remembrance. The room didn't shift, but something settled. The keys still caught, even on the third week. Grace had learned the trick now: lift slightly, twist left, wait for the soft click. Like asking the door's permission instead of demanding it. The building was no longer empty, but it wasn't full either. Some mornings, the hallway echoed too long. Some afternoons, the coffee sat too long. But the light kept showing up, and so did the people. On Monday, a man dropped off a shoebox of paperbacks. He didn't leave a name, just scribbled on the lid, "Not my stories anymore, yours now." On Wednesday, a folded jacket appeared on the coat hook by the exit, stitched above the pocket. "O'Hara, no one claimed it." On Thursday, Grace found a unit coin beneath the coffee machine, round, weathered, stamped with a battalion crest. No note, no explanation. She left it where it was. Ray kept coming, he never knocked. Shadow walked ahead like he remembered the floor plan. Grace never asked why he came so early. Ray never said. They had a routine now. She poured. He nodded. The world stayed steady for 10 more minutes. Tiffany began sketching faces. She sat cross-legged near the windows, the retriever at her feet, pencil dancing across paper like it knew who was watching. One afternoon, Grace walked by and saw a new drawing, not of herself or Ray, but Lena mid-laugh, holding a coffee pot like a microphone. Tiffany looked up, shrugged. She makes it feel like nothing ever left. Grace smiled. That's her trick. On the second Friday, 2 men arrived. Black sedan, no logos, just badges, briefcases, and expressions that didn't change. The older man did the talking. The younger one took notes, eyes scanning the corkboard like he was searching for blueprints someone forgot to file. "We're from the Regional Oversight Committee," the older man said. "This center was flagged for procedural irregularity. We're conducting a compliance review." Grace nodded once, then stepped aside. They moved quietly through the space, measuring, documenting, glancing. At the whiteboard, next group topic, homecomings. At the donation shelf. At the therapy mats, still in boxes. Ray sat in his corner, posture straight but unreadable. Tiffany didn't lift her eyes, just kept sketching. Lena stood behind the counter, one hand resting gently on the coffee urn. The inspector paused in front of Grace. "Ma'am, what qualifications authorize you to manage this facility?" Grace didn't speak right away. She looked past him, at the mug still steaming, the bulletin board, the note someone had tacked up that morning. "Available to talk Tuesdays, used to be terrible at it." Then she answered, quietly, "No, I don't have titles," she said, "just patterns and a habit of listening." The younger inspector stopped writing. His pen hovered, then slowly resumed. They finished in silence. As the 2 men turned to leave, the older one paused. "Thank you for your time." Grace nodded, voice even. But after the door clicked shut behind them, she sat down on the nearest chair. Slowly. Like someone who'd been holding breath longer than she realized. Her hand touched the edge of the table. Fingers traced the grain of the wood, not out of thought, but out of need. 12 days later, a letter arrived. Stamped with the seal of the Department of Veterans Affairs, postmarked 2 weeks earlier, somehow delayed, but unopened until that evening. Grace sat at the small side desk as she pulled the envelope open. Lena was humming in the background, stacking mugs without rushing. Tiffany had just left a sketch on the wall, 3 hands reaching into a coffee pot at once. The letter was brief. "Based on preliminary findings, your center is recommended for model expansion under transitional wellness protocols. You will be contacted by a federal liaison within 30 business days." She read it again, then once more. She didn't smile, she just stood up, refilled the decaf, and exhaled. Before closing that night, Grace checked the board. 3 new slips, "Need someone to practice job interviews with. I can pick up meds at the VA if you're not up for it. First time here, came because someone said I'd be left alone until I was ready." Grace pinned the last one higher, at eye level, then reached under the counter and placed the unit coin, carefully, deliberately, on a small ceramic saucer beneath the coffee machine. She didn't label it, but the silence around it said enough. It wasn't on the calendar, no appointment. No email, just a quiet Tuesday at 9:47 a.m. when the door opened and stayed open longer than it should have. Grace looked up from the counter. He stood there, not moving, as if time hadn't passed, only paused. Arnold stepped in, no entourage, no flash, just a faded work jacket and a navy cap pulled low, shadowing eyes that had seen too much and forgotten nothing. Lena spotted him first. She'd seen photos, everyone had. But the man who stepped into the cafe wasn't the one from headlines. This one moved like he carried something heavier than age. She poured him a black coffee before he could ask. It was just instinct. Grace froze. Arnold didn't speak. Just moved along the edge of the room like a man revisiting blueprints he'd drawn long ago. He paused at the community board, eyes scanning torn flyers, missing cat notices, and job ads scribbled in fading ink. Then his gaze settled on a sketch pinned near the corner. A portrait, Michael, drawn by Tiffany, rendered in charcoal, rough but real, framed by shadows that knew how to carry weight. Arnold studied it, not for artistry, for memory. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled something small from the inner pocket, a photo, yellowed at the corners. He held it out. Grace stepped closer and squinted. Her breath caught. It was her, laughing, apron twisted. Standing beside a man in uniform with a plywood coffee cart between them, she blinked. God, I'd forgotten that day. Her hand drifted to her wedding band. The wind nearly flipped the whole cart over. He kept laughing. Said if it fell, we'd just serve on the ground. Arnold nodded. He sent me that photo from Kuwait. Said if anything ever happened, I should find the woman who made mornings survivable. Grace's voice caught. You kept it all these years. His gaze dropped. I did, because I wasn't ready to admit he wouldn't come back for it. He stepped forward and placed a small wooden box on the counter. No emblem. Just a smoothed edge where fingers had rested too long. This belonged to him. Michael asked me to keep it safe. Grace hesitated. Her fingertips hovered over the lid, trembling. Then she opened it. Inside, a dog tag, tarnished but whole. A napkin, corner torn, but still legible. A scribble in blue ink, don't forget why we sit down together. M. And a photo, a toddler flag upside down, barefoot on grass. On the back, in Michael's handwriting, for Mom. July 14, when I get leave. Grace covered her mouth, not to hold in sobs, but because something had broken quietly and couldn't be put back. Arnold didn't move. He didn't touch the coffee Lena had placed. Just stood in silence as Grace lowered herself onto the nearest chair, not collapsing, but bracing, one hand on the edge of the table, one still resting on the box. They were just kids, she whispered. That photo was before he ever saw combat. Arnold's voice was low, and that napkin, he carried it in his vest, said it reminded him of why he never fired in anger. Time passed, maybe seconds, maybe minutes. Finally, Arnold turned toward the door. I won't be in town long, just enough to make sure this place stays lit. Grace looked up. You built the center. No, Arnold replied. You did. I just made sure the walls stayed dry. She smiled faintly, but didn't say thank you. She couldn't. Just then the bell rang. Tiffany stepped in, hoodie tucked, sketchbook under her arm. She nodded to Grace, then noticed Arnold. Her brows furrowed. Arnold looked at her for a long moment, then to Grace. She doesn't need to know everything, he said softly, only that someone believed in her before she did. He didn't wait for a response, didn't wait for applause. He simply tapped the counter, once, a dull, wooden sound that echoed longer than it should have, then turned and walked out the way he came. Grace watched him go. She didn't speak, didn't chase. Instead, she reached into the box and gently lifted the napkin, traced the ink with one finger, then smiled, not wide, not broken, just enough to know that the box had finally reached the right hands. The cafe had no grand reopening, no ribbon, no press, just one small chalkboard outside where someone had written, "Back on, black coffee, no drama." Inside, the air smelled the same, burnt edges of old espresso, worn leather seats, and something softer, like a memory reheating. Grace arrived early, earlier than she used to, before the sun peeled off the street lamps, before anyone could say welcome back. She wore no makeup, no perfume, just the ring, the same apron, and a small pin on her collar, a silver coffee cup with a star in the foam. Tiffany had given it to her. Some people get stars on Hollywood Boulevard, the girl had said, shrugging. You get yours here. Lena returned too, not because anyone asked, because places like this didn't run on payroll, they ran on belief, and caffeine, in that order. At 7 a.m., the first customer walked in. A man in a maintenance vest who nodded at Grace but said nothing. She handed him his usual. He left a tip larger than the bill and a folded note underneath. She didn't open it yet. By 7:30, the place wasn't packed. But it wasn't empty. Soldiers, veterans, families, a few teenage boys who tried not to look like they were watching something sacred. The wall had changed, not dramatically, but deeply. Someone had cleaned it just enough to show the old grain, fingerprints preserved, not erased. A rough sketch of Michael, taped to the wall now, looked like it had always belonged. Initials scribbled in the bottom corner, T. Avery. Below it, the photo Arnold had left Grace and Michael with the windblown cart, captured like a breath held too long. Pinned beneath was the dog tag, not sealed, not framed, just hanging there quiet and solid. And then the napkin. The same one from the box. Don't forget why we sit down together. Someone had copied the quote onto the corner of the chalkboard, smaller, quieter, but permanent enough. At 8:02 a.m. A young woman entered with a toddler on her hip. She looked nervous. Grace recognized the posture, not the name. The same way Michael's sister used to walk into base canteens, holding something she wasn't sure how to carry. The woman ordered 1 coffee, 1 milk. Grace gave her a 3rd cup. Empty. For what you don't say out loud, she whispered. The woman nodded. She didn't cry. She just sat near the window and let the silence explain things. At 8:43 the inspector returned. Not Prescott, the younger one, from before. Clipboard under one arm, no pen. He walked to the board, stood still, then reached into his coat, pulled out something small and placed it on the counter before walking out. Later Lena picked it up. She turned it over. It wasn't currency. It was a challenge coin, one that shouldn't be casually given. No note, no reason, but Grace knew. By 10 a.m. someone played a song on the jukebox. Old country. Too much static, but the melody knew the walls. Grace didn't dance, but she paused, tapped the tempo with her fingers along the edge of the counter, then unfolded the note from earlier. I don't know your name. But when my brother came home in 2006, he told me a story about a waitress who asked if his coffee needed room. He said it was the first time anyone had asked him anything that wasn't about war. You didn't remember. But he never forgot. Thank you. No name, just a receipt tucked behind it, paid in full, scribbled on the back, for Grace. Near the end of the shift, Tiffany came through the back door. No more vest. She wore a dark green jacket, slightly oversized, with a crooked patch on the sleeve, not issued, just sewn. They asked if I wanted to stay, she said, almost whispering. I said I already had. Grace didn't say much, just smiled. Tiffany pulled out a folded napkin, placed it by the register. Some things don't start until someone pours the first cup. The door jingled once more. Ray walked in, hat pulled low. He sat in the corner. Michael's old seat. He placed a small metal box on the table. What's that? Grace asked. Ray opened it. Inside, no medals, no photos, just names, dozens, some smudged, one added today. People I forgot to thank, he said. Grace took a pen from behind her ear, clicked it once, added a name, not hers, Michael's. The cafe fell quiet again, not empty, just settled, the kind of quiet you only notice when something real is happening. And through the sunlit slats on the window, the light bent over everything, like service bars on a uniform, stronger than coffee and quieter than applause. They didn't announce anything. No flyers, no hashtags. Just a handwritten sign taped to the inside window, closed this morning, reopen after remembrance, coffee still warm. Grace hadn't planned on speaking. She wasn't even sure why the folding chairs were all facing the front, or why the sunlight through the half-cleaned blinds looked like stage lights across the linoleum floor. The old men in uniform came first, not many, just enough to make the room feel like it remembered something before it was told. Ray stood beside the jukebox, his hat still low. He nodded once when Grace arrived, but didn't step forward. That wasn't his way. Tiffany came in late, holding the same napkin she'd left by the register, now pressed flat inside a glass frame. She didn't speak either, just set it on the counter, let it say what it said. Some things don't start until someone pours the first cup. A few people brought things, not speeches, things. A unit patch faded to gray. A photo of a coffee mug on a tank's hatch, dated 2004. A paper receipt from 1996, with "For Grace" written in pencil. They didn't display them, just placed them gently on the old corner table. Michael's table. Arnold arrived just before the clock struck 10, not in uniform, not in black. He wore a simple navy jacket, the same one from the photo Michael had drawn, and carried nothing but a small envelope, folded and sealed. He didn't approach the center, didn't stand near Grace. He sat, back row, quiet, hands folded like someone attending a friend's wake, not leading it. Grace noticed him, but didn't move. She took the small box from behind the counter, the one with Michael's dog tag, the napkin, the photo. She placed it at the center of the room. No words. Someone had lit a candle in a diner mug. It flickered but didn't die. Then Lena walked in. She'd been gone since the last inspection. No one knew why, but she walked in like she'd just left to catch her breath. She didn't sit. She went to the board, the one above the coffee station, wiped a small corner clean. Wrote 3 words, he remembered quietly. Then left. No one clapped, no one sang, but something started moving, a slow shift, like when old engines restart after winter. The inspector, the younger one, passed Grace on the way out. He didn't say anything, just left a sealed government envelope on the counter, marked Final Status Review. She didn't open it. Instead, she looked at the framed napkin, then at the old metal box, then at the chair beside her, empty. But not. She reached into her apron and took out her name tag, the one she hadn't worn since the firing. The clip was rusted. The ink faded. She walked to the wall behind the register. Found a nail left over from a missing picture frame, hung it there, didn't straighten it, didn't step back, just walked away. Outside, the sun was beginning to tip westward. Arnold stood, finally. He didn't speak to the crowd, only to Grace. And only one sentence. You kept the place warmer than the coffee ever did. She nodded. Then, and only then, she took the envelope from his hand, not the government one, the other. She didn't open it either. Just placed it next to the dog tag. The candle was still burning. No music played, no awards handed out. But when people left that morning, they paused by the window, looked through the glass, not at Grace, not at the board, but at the corner table, where for the first time in 3 decades, someone had written a name, not in chalk, not on a form, but with a teaspoon dipped in coffee, dabbed slowly across a napkin. Michael. Not erased, not forgotten, just poured back in.